Welcome to another edition of the Best Business Minds, where we interview business leaders and academics that write thought-provoking books. I'm Marc Kramer, serial entrepreneur who consults with family businesses and entrepreneurs. And currently, I'm teaching entrepreneurship at Vinh University in Hanoi, Vietnam. Today's guest is Dr. Craig Detweiler, author of the book Honest Creativity: The Foundations of Boundless, Good, and Inspired Innovation. Craig, welcome. It's so great to have you. I so enjoyed the book.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. Glad to be here.
So, Craig, let's talk about first your professional path. Um, where did you start and how did you get to where you're at right now?
I am, I would say, a storyteller by background and trade. Um, Grew up loving movies and TV and uh, music, and uh, got into USC Film School and learned, how to tell stories on the big screen. Um, have had great colleagues and grew up in the business together. And so I've been in and around Hollywood, for a number of years.
What are some of the projects you worked on, maybe that we might be familiar with?
Well, you might have to, be on the Disney Channel at like midnight or something to catch some of some of my work. I've written both, things for kids, teenagers. I've done um, documentaries. Did a project that Angela Bassett was the narrator on about justice and Africa. So I've been all over the world. It's been a grand life. That one thing I love about um, filmmaking is that it's a little bit like being a journalist, right? Where you're entering a bunch of different worlds and picking up expertise and experiences along the way. And you never know how they're going to fit together, which I think is also part of the entrepreneurial journey as
Uh,
well.
Would you tell me a little bit about your academic, um, where you are academically now?
Right. Well, I'm the dean of a Grand Canyon University, which is really one of the best business turnaround success stories. They had less than 1,000 students 15 years ago. We're about to close and pivoted towards online and built an online, uh, uh, you know, LMS, learning management system, that was very accessible and affordable. And now we have over 100,000 students, over 80,000 online, 25,000 on the campus in Phoenix. And I'm honored to be the Dean of the College of Arts and Media. And so I'm helping storytellers launch their series ideas, their companies, their projects, and get out into the marketplace.
That's awesome. And people are really going to enjoy the book. So let's start off with in chapter one. You mentioned what are the common fears creative people encounter, and how do you recommend them facing them?
Mm. Well, I think, yeah, so often I think there's a lot of self-sabotage in the world of creativity and entrepreneurship. You have an idea and you think maybe, but you also start talking yourself out of it and coming up with all the reasons why this won't work. And it's often I don't want to say it's the foolhardy, but it's more the fearless who presses through those reasons and says, there's reasons not to do this, but I'm going to take that chance. I'm going to take that risk. And so the book, there's a lot of, I'd say, cheerleading in the book and citing all the different unlikely success stories, all the people who defied the odds, all those who pressed on in the face of those fears and that self-sabotage and got to the other side.
Can you describe a time when procrastination or perfectionism threatened your own creative process and what you learned from it? And I met a lot of people who are perfectionists, especially in the entrepreneurial world, and don't want that product to get out until it's absolutely perfect.
Yeah, I think it's really hard. I've seen so many students over the years who worry and say, "Well, I can't put this out there. I'm not as professional or as polished as I want to be." And I said, "Well, how are you going to get there unless you go ahead and put an early iteration of first effort?" unless you're willing to take feedback and take criticism and polish your craft. All too often, I think that perfectionism can be the enemy of progress. And it's lovely to say, ah, yes, everything's been worked out, all the details, but so often it's the second, the third, or the fourth generation of a product or an idea or a story, something that's been rewritten, something that's been polished, something that's been workshopped. That is, I think, really the process that I encourage.
How do you help students or mentees move past shame or feelings of unworthiness that block creativity?
Mm, well, there is, I think, so much imposter syndrome because we can see, somebody who's made it online, and we think I'm not that good, or I'm not that talented, or I'm not that original. And yet, I think, the persistent tend to be the ones who actually succeed. It's the person who figures out how to get off the mat after being defeated and gets up again and says, I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to not let this opportunity destroy me, but I'm going to use it as an opportunity to learn and uh, and give it another go, give it another try, give it another iteration. And so it's that persistence that I find that pays off in the entrepreneurial and creative space.
I mean, isn't that what we always hear? Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, how many rejections they got, and people tell them they shouldn't even be actors and they shouldn't be in the movie. And now between the two of them, they've got three Oscars together, and they're considered, his icons in the movie
Right.
industry now, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
and they really wrote their way to success. It was Good Will Hunting that had no special effects other than a close up on the human face. That is what enabled them to break through and really write themselves into self-determination in Hollywood, which is so hard to do.
it's particularly interesting that um, not Matt Damon was in a movie, the only really failed movie of the guy from The Godfather,
Oh,
Robert
Francis Ford
Duvall.
Coppola? Oh,
Robert
Duvall? Yeah,
Duvall, and,
yeah.
and he was in Geronimo, and he thought I'd made it, and that was the one movie that Robert Duvall made that totally bombed at the box office, and then Matt Damon wasn't in anything for another 5 years.
Yeah. And that's that failure, right? That's if you're afraid of failure, it's going to be very hard to enter the creative realm or to enter the entrepreneurial world. It's just part of the gig. And so it's developing that resilience and that grit that is what separates many of the folks who are successful from those who quit just too early.
Don't today's young people, it's much different than when we were younger, where you didn't have the level of global competition that you have now. And so you've gotten to develop a very hardened shell and be very resilient to survive, even if you're not an entrepreneur, right? Today. Uh,
Absolutely. And that
and
ability to see the entire field, to have all that access to information can be a bit overwhelming. It can feel like, gosh, I don't have an original idea. Somebody else is doing something like this or something like that. So it's developing your niche. It's kind of seeing just a slight gap in the market is often enough to open up possibilities for yourself.
you talk about dishonest creativity that cuts corners. What advice do you have for resisting this temptation in a results-driven world? What does that even mean, dishonest creativity?
Well, we're finding with AI, right? There's lots of work that can be done with a prompt. And so you can generate a flyer, you can generate text, you can write a letter. But scientists are also discovering that, in a sense, we're already dumbing ourselves down if we use too much AI, that we're outsourcing too much of that creative ability. And so you think you're saving time, but in some cases, you're also shortchanging your own possibilities. That by, going down some um, paths that may not pay off, you may find something else down that creative, um, you know, sidebar. And so I can remember even as a kid wandering around a library, looking at books and suddenly discovering something. And a lot of that now is cut out on the internet, right? Search is so specific that it often gives us what we're asking for. And it's often when our mind is like wandering that we find these surprises and we start to put things together, unlikely combinations. And that's often where creativity comes from, is these jamming together of things that people haven't quite imagined should be combined.
What's your own creative process?
It's well, there I've as a screenwriter, I've dealt with I would call it the terror of the blank page, and
Right,
just that
sure.
fade in, and you don't know what's going to happen. So I have over the years, I will outline and I will consider so many possibilities before I put pen to page or sit down at the typewriter. So I love to keep things loose. I love ideas on a blackboard. I love 3x5 cards and just having lots of different notes, lots of different possibilities, and then stepping back and kind of seeing, is this the right order? Is this how it should be approached? What if I move this piece and put it over here with that piece? And so I think oftentimes we don't maybe spend enough time in that outline stage, um, kind of flipping through the possibilities before we commit and start down a path.
Do you, when I use AI, I write everything down on a Word document, everything I'm thinking about, and and then I ask AI to bounce it off of AI and find out what the improvements. Are you and others doing that when I mean, I don't think you can just come out and give one line, say, okay, give me a storyline on this, because it's not going to be creative like a human mind can be, but it can be a good sounding board. Are you using AI at all to be a sounding board?
I think it is a very helpful organizer. Once you've got several different pieces and you're maybe not sure how to connect them, or you're not sure what the possibilities or implications are, you can put it in AI who can consider all the possibilities quickly and take those kind of half-formed notes and start to give it some shape. And I think that's not unlike what happens in a writer's room in Hollywood, where you have um, the showrunners and the producers are just throwing out ideas. They literally call it spitballing, and yet you have to have someone in the room who is taking notes and forming all those ideas and kind of crazy notions, and then saying, "I think what I'm seeing is this." And so that AI as assistant, I think, has some genuine merit.
Do the best people who lead creative types, what do they do that unlocks your creativity?
I think a lot of it is a bit counterintuitive. It's literally when you're blocked, it's getting up and walking away from the computer. It's taking a drive. It's going for a bike ride. It's putting yourself in a different situation. So changing settings, changing posture, giving yourself space is where I think a lot of the best uh, ideas come from. There's science that there's a reason why we have all these great ideas in the shower. When we're not applying our mind to a particular problem is when these maybe brighter ideas and crazy notions pop up. And out of that often comes the best ideas.
When you're leading a creative team, do you try to stress them, thinking that will make them more focused, or do you try to relax people and feel that works better for them? What's the best way?
I think you're talking about two different steps in the creative process. There's that initial spark, and I think the initial spark happens when we aren't stressed. It's when we're away from the desk. It's when we're walking around. It's when we're hiking. It's when we're cooking, doing the dishes. All of those times are when our brain, I think the plasticity of our brain expands. When you're talking about a deadline, deadlines are helpful because they push us past that procrastination. They force us to put pen to paper. They force us to make our ideas concrete. And it takes both. It takes the unstructured space, the what if time, and then the this is what it actually is. And so getting ourselves to the marketplace, having a journalistic time when that the idea has to be published or the product has to be shipped, applying ourselves in rigorous ways, that is also part of the creative process. But it's that second or third order of the creative process.
What is important for creative people to acknowledge their ambition as well as their flaws? Why is that
Mm.
important?
Yeah, it's funny. People will get into this humility thing of like, oh, not me. Oh, I don't really want it. But then you think about the millions of people who show up in Hollywood or that come to entrepreneurial conferences, and it's like part of me who says, just be honest. You want to be famous. You want an Oscar. You want to be a millionaire. And it's maybe only in owning that ambition that we also start to take ourselves seriously. All too often, I think we sort of use like, oh, I'm not really that person, or that's not really what I want. And we use that as a way to maybe protect ourselves from disappointment. But it's in naming it and creating those goals that we say, no, no, I am serious about this. And then when we take ourselves seriously, own that ambition, then you can start to develop a real plan and say, what are the steps that get me from here to there? And it doesn't become some distant pipe dream or something we say, well, I don't really care. I don't really want it. No, you do want it. You got in your car, you drove to Hollywood. You risked your whole life to get there. You really, really, really want to be on that stage and give that Oscar speech. So let's think about how to make that possible.
How do you personally balance the tension between healthy ambition and potential envy?
Well, that's envy the green monster is I think that could be a real bear to wrestle with. You think about a film like Amadeus, where the uh, you know Salieri's envy of the natural talent of Mozart consumes him, and so even though he's a very talented composer himself, the fact that he won't be the very best turns him into this murderous um, schemer. And so I have seen that where um, I would call it like the dark side of envy, where we say, why them and not me? And we start to attack them and even start to attack ourselves in that process. I think there's a healthy side of I would like to be, and that can motivate us. And when we start to say, we're not that different, I do have the same possibilities and potential that they do. So comparison can rob us of a lot of joy, and but a healthy form of leveling and realizing that we're not that different, that I feel like can be a helpful motivator.
What role does anger or longing play in fueling creativity based on your research and experiences?
It's interesting. I think having a chip on your shoulder can be a fine starting point. The proving to your doubters, proving to an old teacher, a parent, that I can do it. I think that could be a great. You need like a inner engine that that causes you to dig a little bit deeper. An example I use in the book is Lamborghini began with a tractor company, and he had bought a Ferrari and was very disappointed in um, the mechanism of the Ferrari. He didn't understand why it was braking all the time, and so the founding of Lamborghini as a car company was to prove that Ferrari was wrong. Ferrari was cheap, and Lamborghini would be better. And so that desire to kind of prove somebody wrong, show them that that they underestimated them. Ferrari looked down on Lamborghini and said, "Oh, you're just a little farmer. What do you know about cars? Stick to your own lane." And of course, Lamborghini has gone on and proven a few things to Ferraris as well.
Can you share a story of a former student or colleague whose drive or aspiration even inspired you?
Oh, there's at USC Film School where I graduated, it's very hard when you are dealing with folks who are 20, 25 years old to know who has the drive to handle the disappointment and who gets off the mat and who um, has the resilience. But that is what actually separates people. Um, One of my colleagues that I went to film school with, Scott Derrickson, has directed, big films like Doctor Strange for Marvel, the horror film Sinister, The Black Phone. He's had tremendous success, but within that, he also once directed a remake of The Day the Earth Stood Still with Keanu Reeves, which was a big bomb, lost like millions of dollars for the studio. And many folks who end up in what they call director's jail struggle to get out, and in some cases never do. And he went back to his roots. He said, I'm going to go back to horror. I'm going to do a low budget film after this big budget Hollywood failure. And that low budget film was Sinister, which he wrote and directed and was about a writer who's had a hit and is trying to figure out how to get another hit. And is he willing to, risk his family, risk his health, move into a haunted house to pursue that? And that became the hit that restarted his career.
Yeah, it reminds me that Shyamalan Knight had, he's from Philly like I am, and had a string of hits and then had a lot of dry holes to the point that he was having to finance his own movies because they didn't feel he was financeable. And now he seems to be on a path back again with some success. How does somebody dig themselves out? I mean, you go from the A-lister to the point that because the money guys in Hollywood are no different than venture capitalists anywhere. It's one thing to have one failure. Okay, he had a failure, but he'd always been so good. Now you have two failures. I'm a little worried about him. Three failures. Yeah, I'm not touching that guy for anything.
Right, right.
And then how does he have the self-belief in what he's doing? Or does he look and say, this is what I do for a living. I got no, I'm not going to become a dentist now.
Right. Yes. Well, oftentimes what you'll see is the creative folks going back to their roots. If they've gotten, in a sense, over their skis. They started doing low budget films, and then they ended up with, $100 million, $200 million budgets. So it starts with, I think, going back. And there's some genres that are easier to do that with. You can do that with comedy. You can do that with horror. You can go back and make a small, scary film. Um, and that, I think, is how you restart. You get in touch with your creative roots. You go back to your origins, and you say, what was I in this for to begin with? And I think it's the same thing for an entrepreneur. Oftentimes it starts with an idea of a product or how to make life better for other people. And so you have to kind of get back to like, oh yeah, it's not about just making money, but it's actually about bringing value to customers and to clients. And so you have to, I think, rediscover kind of the heart of why you're in the business, why you're in this creative endeavor.
Question from the audience. In your view, what does honest storytelling look like in science-driven industries like biotech, where the narrative can influence funding, public trust, credibility with regulatory agencies?
It's a great question. Obviously, you've got the example of Elizabeth Holmes,
Yes.
where
Yeah.
dishonest science will not last. Like the things that are put to the test, if they don't have real solutions, you're going to come up empty. The book is called Honest Creativity because I think that is a distinguisher in the marketplace. There's so much, I would call it, over promise and under deliver, that if you have a real product that really makes a difference in people's lives, that's a good gamble. And you may not be the best marketer, right? Marketing is important. Marketing helps. The narrative is important. But Elizabeth Holmes was great at casting a narrative, not so great at actually building, a blood test that worked. So just because she had a good idea, when she couldn't make the science work, she still kept telling the false narrative. And that is not the way to build a business.
Yeah, it amazes me that she did because all she had to do was tell them, I've tried everything and we just haven't been able to get it right. She'd have never had a problem. The board just would have said, okay, you still got $100 million or whatever the number is. What's the, what other direction could we go in? And she would have went in that direction. Even if she spent all the money, all of them would have said, hey, you gave your best effort. And she probably would have raised money again for some other thing because people would have
100%.
trusted her. But she blew herself up unnecessarily.
That's it. That's it. And that's why dishonest creativity, um, I just don't think it's a wise approach. She lived a high life for a time. Um, but is that worth going to jail? Is that worth, being trounced in the public square for life? I don't think
Uh,
so.
No, I mean, ruining your reputation. It's all you have at the end of the day is your
That's it.
word. And if you blow that, well, you've got nothing left. Chapter 3, honest limitations. How can creative constraints and limitations become assets rather than obstacles in making meaningful work?
Mm, well, it's the necessity can be such the mother of invention. So taking what you already have, figuring out how to build around what is already nearby, I think just a very wise thing. Was it Robert Rodriguez who made El Mariachi for I think under $7,000? That's how he started his Hollywood career. And he knew before he started making the film, he had a friend who had a bar, he had a friend who had a bus driver, who was a bus driver, and he had another friend who was a musician. And so he created a story about a mariachi player who had a guitar and a gun, and it goes really from the bar to the bus and has chases in between. So he took the very few elements that he had access to and built an entire narrative around that. And so it's thinking through your relationships, it's thinking through your neighborhood, your Rolodex, your contacts, thinking through what you already know or what a friend might know, thinking through what materials are available to you, what kind of markets are available to you, and building out. So building from small to large rather than casting this huge vision that requires so much capital that you may never get there. Start with the capital that is contained and available and build.
Um, what's an example from your own life or career where working within strict limits produced a surprising result?
Um, one of I think it was maybe the second film that I got made. Um, it involved extreme sports and had snowboarding, skiing, and surfing, as well as skateboarding at the heart of it. And because we were constrained by snow and we were working on this in January, we said, we've got to finish this script in the next month if we're going to start shooting, casting, and shooting this thing before this season of snow ends. And so, oftentimes, the speed at which you approach something uh, creatively can actually be an advantage by just saying, we're going to do this in the next 60 days. We're going to do this in the next 90 days. Again, it focuses your brain, it focuses your creativity, it gathers people to the task, to the market, um, and it enables something to get done. If we'd had a whole nother year to create it and had plenty of time, we may not have written as fast, and we may not have attained the capital, and we may not have gotten it out to the marketplace as quickly.
I find when I give my students a half an hour to do something, the results are great. I
Yeah.
find if I give them too much time, it's like their brain procrastinates and the result isn't as sharp as if I say you got a half an hour to figure this out and put together 5 slides. It always looks amazing for some reason.
I just think it enables us to really get down to the core and focus on the essentials. And oftentimes that is how communication works, right? That ability to kind of cut through the clutter and get to the core of our message, get to the core of our market. It's very clarifying.
When you're working with a team of creative people, is there a difference between men and women? Is there a gender difference in terms of motivating them and getting the most out of them?
I don't think so. I think there are different types. There are some types of people who are more motivated by competition. They just want to win. There's other people who value cooperation and community building, bringing a bunch of collaboration to the table. But I don't know that that's necessarily male or female. I think what we've found is you need a variety of skills on that team, right? So if you have someone who's a driver who says, we're going to win at all costs and we're going to press through, that's an important skill. But someone who's going to build a ethos, build a team, allow it to be a sustainable, repeatable effort, that's also really valuable. And so you'll see this happen over and over with companies where you might have somebody like a Steve Jobs who is a driver, but he can also drive people into the ground and he can also drive people away. So how do you find that complementary person who focuses on how to build a sustainable ethos and making room for everybody to be at their creative best?
Yeah, I don't think if there wasn't a Steve Wozniak in Act One and a Tim Cook in Act Two, Steve Jobs wouldn't be an iconic character that he became because I had lunch with him in 1990 with a group of other people, but I sat next to him, and I went to walk him out, and his people either walked way in front or way in back. So when he got in the car, I asked them, why you walk so far from him?" They go, "Because he picks on us. He can be really nasty." And
Wow.
I said, "But why do you stay?" And he said, "Because he's a genius." Uh, and so, people would put up with it, but they wouldn't necessarily put up with him. So they stayed away from him. And I imagine in Hollywood, there's lots of people that are like, you'd like to push them off the top of the roof, but they've got this certain something that makes it all click for everybody.
You see it in creative couples. Christopher Nolan gets all the credit for Oppenheimer, but who's on that Oscar stage with him? It's his producer and his wife and life partner, Emma Thomas. And so she's providing a certain level of stability and continuity amongst those films. She's helping him build a company that allows him to spark and to attempt, kind of foolish and grand gestures. But it's the team of the two of them together that really allows his success and his, the hit rate that he has. It's so much higher than the normal Hollywood person.
How do you help others embrace limitation as part of the creative process, especially in an age of unlimited digital tools?
Mm. Yeah, I think it's really hard when everybody feels like they can fix it later. They will often, you'll see it in Hollywood movies now where they, in a sense, they almost film too much. They have, five cameras and they can do it from every angle and they can decide later how they want to use it. I think it's always been helpful to have limited budget, limited time, and having to make hard decisions and say, no, no, this is the best route. Um, this is how we're going to commit ourselves. And then to not look back and to not say, what if? I think there's a lot of what if that goes on and a lot of, kind of saying, well, maybe I'll do this later, maybe I'll do this later. And all of that indecision, I think, can drag out that creative process and dilute your final product.
People much more creative when they have less.
That's what I'm saying. That's
Yeah.
it.
I even notice with family businesses that when the family business is doing well, they all get along great. When the family business is, when it's raining money, then everybody is trying to dislodge everybody else so they can be the king instead of just being grateful that everything is going so well for them.
There it is.
You write about the importance of recycling ideas. How can new creators avoid simply imitating past styles in their work, which we see quite often in Hollywood, where people just, oh, that formula was a hit. Let's just keep following that formula until that formula burns out.
It's interesting. I find in Hollywood it has to you have to refer to enough of a hit or a form, if you defy the genre rules too much, then they don't quite know what this product is. Is it a comedy? Is it a drama? Is it sci-fi? Is it action? And when you say, yes, it's all of those things, that's very hard for consumers in the marketplace to embrace. And so, it's like we've got knives and forks, and when somebody decided to come up with a spork,
Yeah.
it's okay, it's a good idea. Maybe it works for camping, but on, most days, it's like, I don't want to just have one. There's a reason why there's a knife and there's a fork, and a spoon. Uh, Over time, we found these three things are helpful. So, so in that sense, sticking to, I guess, tried and true forms that people are comfortable with, that people have found useful, and improving within the boundaries of what is already understood tends to be a better idea. Uh, it's like people we found that they don't necessarily want a people mover that is on, I can't remember what was the name of that product that you
Oh,
used.
oh, the Peloton.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, I was thinking about the one that you were able to use around town. It's like, no, I actually like cars, or I like, I
Oh, the
don't want,
scooters that
yeah,
you rent.
different kinds of scooters, right? It's like, well,
Yeah.
they are helpful, but it's not, I don't want that all the time. They're disposable. They're not going to replace cars. Um, and so I think sticking to forms that we've found, like in a car, it's like, I like to have my stuff here. I want to have a drink, a cup holder, and I want to have something in the trunk, and I might change clothes later. And so all of those things kind of come with the car. And we often forget that and say, well, don't you want to throw that away and just have a scooter because it's lighter and easier? And it's like, no, I don't. I don't want a scooter to work.
What does honest preparation look like before beginning a new creative project?
Hmm. I think with students, I often see them wanting to get ahead of themselves and kind of skip the hard work. They want to just become accomplished overnight, and they don't quite realize that it's the years of preparation, that it's the developing of a craft, that it's experimenting and developing some muscle memory that is what enables you to succeed later. You'll find people who have that meteoric success and then aren't necessarily prepared to recreate it because they haven't um, built enough know-how uh, into their life experience. You see it with these tech startups and unicorns where they ultimately need what they call adult supervision, right? Where they need to bring in somebody who has actually run a huge company, somebody who's older. So I don't necessarily want to skip out on the hard-earned wisdom. I think that's honest preparation that pays off in the end.
How do you advise artists and innovators to find the right balance between study, planning, and spontaneous experimentation?
Well, the study and planning is developing the skills that you are going to need later. And of course, there's no, there was that famous the 10,000 hour rule
Yes,
as one measure, right?
by
Um,
Malcolm Gladwell. Yeah.
yeah, but I'm not sure that that's in a sense that's a random. number that you could apply and say, well, the Beatles in Hamburg went and practiced their craft in Germany before they ever hit it big back home in Liverpool, London, and ultimately in New York City on the Ed Sullivan Show. It was the hours of practicing in the Cavern Club that enabled them to, be prepared for the Klieg uh, publicity. So uh, I do think there's something to be said for study, for practice, for rehearsal, and also in the age of AI, where a lot of people might be able to produce something quickly. Can they reproduce it? Can they do it again? I think virtuosity will actually become more valuable in an era of creative shortcuts. So the person who can actually dance, the person who can actually act, sing, dance will become much more valuable.
How can practicing a craft in community as opposed to in isolation transform the creative process?
Mm. I think loneliness is one of the hardest parts of the creative or entrepreneurial experience. Um, all too often, it starts, kind of sitting alone with ideas, uh, a company where you can't afford to pay anybody else, and it just can be very isolating and discouraging. So I think that was one of the reasons why the co-working spaces became so popular so quickly is that we are communal beings. We are meant to be together. And that creative spark that comes from collaboration, I think, is a huge win-win. There's a reason why a lot of wealth and ideas are concentrated in cities. It comes from that cross pollination of ideas, of capital. Um, it's hard, again, even just to be, isolated or alone in the country. Um, you might have a good idea in the country. The guy who invented the television set, Philo T. Farnsworth, was a farm boy. And his idea for how a TV works came from looking at a field in the farm, all of the lines that you saw. It came from looking at that. But then when it came time to take it to the marketplace, he was not prepared to deal with, RCA Corporation or General Electric. He just didn't have enough life experience to figure out how to take his idea to the market in a way that would be sustainable and winnable.
How do you recommend handling distractions and structuring routines for creative work in our hyper-connected world? But before you answer that, I meant to ask you, when the pandemic hit and everybody was working from home, and then people, especially young people under 35, didn't want to go back into the workforce. What was your take on that? Because my own take was, how can you it's fine for lawyers and accountants, certain professions where you're not collaboration doesn't mean much, but in so many other businesses without the collaboration you have nothing. So what was your take on that?
Well, we do have a bit of, I would say, a loneliness epidemic right now. Technology enables us to cross huge distances. And to, here you are in Vietnam, I'm talking from California. That's amazing. But proximity is something that we still desire as humans. And it's when we're in the office and just having casual walk-bys and exchanging ideas in the hallway is where often the best creative solutions arise. So, the disembodied communication that goes on now, I think, is hard on our souls and our bodies. I think it wears us down. We do need to be proximate to each other, and we do need to have shared spaces face to face.
You describe creativity as a type of deep listening or presence. Why is receptivity so crucial for innovation?
Hmm. I think it's easy for us to talk ourselves out of good ideas. Um, and we think, oh, that was dumb, or we just dismiss it and we don't even write it down, or we don't even um, start to act on it. So I think being open, having space, again, that's why, you know, going for a bike ride, walking on a beach, being in a park, going fishing, all of these activities that are seemingly wasting time are when we often receive those best ideas. So it's learning to trust your gut or your instinct. It's learning to listen to that inner voice and not talk ourselves out of it, to not self-doubt, um, but to say, ah, that thing that crossed through my head, maybe I need to hold on to that. How do I write that down? How do I capture it? Even how do I capture dreams, uh, visions that we have at night? Keeping a notebook by our bed to scribble down ideas. As a screenwriter, that's really important for me.
Can you share a story where an unexpected happy accident or moment of inspiration changed a project's direction?
Mm, that's a great question. I've often been uh, in a room, maybe working on a project, writing on something with a creative partner, and my spouse will be in the other room or down the hall, and she'll just like shout out a solution. She'll just be like, "No, no, 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 you should do this." Um, I was working on a project where we had a scene, I think it was set in Mexico, and so you had four guys who were, I said, well, they're drinking, they're doing tequila, and the director was like, I don't want to do that. That's too easy. And my wife was like, how about hot sauce? How about salsa? And so rather than like trying to drink each other under the table, it became who can endure the hottest salsa. And it was just fresher and it was funnier. And the idea came from down the hall. It came from the person who wasn't, in theory, paying attention or wasn't even in the room. And so it's being open to those ideas wherever they may come, and having ears to hear and eyes to see the possibility that's right in front of you.
How do you differentiate between inspiration that comes from within and that which feels more mysterious or external?
Yeah, that is a great question, Mark. Uh, I think it's mostly about credit. We often want to take the credit for ideas. Um, but the truth is, there's so much floating around us at any time. Um, I think we need to be humble about where things come from. It may have been something somebody else said. It may have been something else we heard or saw. Um, we've seen it in with songwriters where George Harrison's song "My Sweet Lord," he had to ultimately pay for unconscious stealing from a song called "He's So Fine" by the Chiffons that I believe Phil Spector had produced. It was like that tune was kind of in his head or in his body. Um, Paul McCartney, with the song "Yesterday," thought that it was somebody else's song. It came to him. He loved the simple simplicity of the melody and was like, what is this? And he asked people for like months, have you heard this song before? Is this somebody else's song? And he honestly, I think, was humble about it and realized the song had come to him, but he received it as if it was somebody else's song. And I think that's really the proper way, is to humbly credit not just our own genius, but this creative force. Some might call it the muse, you know, some may point to the divine, but this idea that the best ideas often come from outside and bubble up within.
What practices or habits help creatives develop sharper perception and discernment?
Hmm. I think it does come from a certain almost meditative approach to life. I think it comes from routines, but those routines need to have room or space. So for me, that's walking on the beach. and just seeing a large space on the horizon. It gives my brain room to imagine different scenarios, different possibilities. um, I think going through to the same places every day and doing things in a routine way trains our eyes and ears to notice small differences. And in noticing small differences, I think that's where good entrepreneurial ideas often come from. You notice, oh, why are people doing this? This looks a little different. What is that thing they're all drinking? What is that thing they're all wearing? How is behavior changing? So it's doing enough of the same things every day and training your eyes and your ears to be perceptive in that routine.
How does observation or attentiveness to everyday life inform lasting artistic or entrepreneurial breakthroughs? I think that's why I love travel so much, is because it's such a mind opener.
Mhm. And when you see other people living differently or doing things differently, I think it does train your mind in different possibilities. I taught English and lived in Japan for a while. And in over those couple of years that I was in Tokyo, it was so interesting to realize that they were reading both up and down and from right to left. And just, I think it trained my brain to, in a sense, uh, flip the script and constantly say, well, it doesn't actually have to go from, you know, left to right, and it doesn't have to be read, across the page. It can be read down the page, and just looking at life that way, I think, is how you get better solutions. Um, okay, if everybody's moving in this direction, what's a different way we can think about it? Um, that's, I think, where um, breakthroughs come from.
Can you share how interdisciplinary approaches, blending science and art, foster new ideas?
Hmm. Well, we talked earlier about Apple, and the distinguisher for them in the marketplace was that a strange attention, the class that Steve Jobs took that was about fonts, that was about calligraphy, and it gave him a sense of Apple creating beautiful computers that allowed people to choose more personal expression on their literal screen. Um, and so it made an alternative to, I would say, the more rigorous scientific approach, the PC approach that was a bit flat and a bit uniform. The personalization that Apple brought became a whole campaign for them, the Apple versus PC campaign that really made them pop in the marketplace.
How do you encourage others to stay open to surprise and ambiguity during a messy middle of creative projects?
That's really good. Um, a screenplay, a blueprint is only, a plan. It's a best laid plan. But when you actually start building the house, building the company, filming the script, you have to stay open in the moment, in the space where you notice, there's a play of light that's a little bit differently here. There's a nuance in what that actor is doing. The marketplace has shifted than from when we first started. So being open to all of those things, to, I would say, a form of improv amidst our best laid plans. It's both and. It's both and.
Why do you believe so many creatives struggle to ask for help or build teams around their vision?
I think in the West, we have this very strong notion of like the individual lone genius, the lone wolf. And there's a certain pride that develops of like the artist in the studio or in the lab, the scientist in the lab. The notion of like Thomas Edison being, some kind of genius. And you don't realize that it was people who were working for him who were creating the innovations with cameras or with the ability to make movies. Even with George Lucas, it often gets credit for THX sound. But one of my professors was, his name was Tom Homelinson, and he is the one who created that sound experiment that became THX in theaters. That was the THX. So other people may get the credit, and I think there's a tendency for us to try to say, "Oh, I did it all myself," so that we can say, "Ah, it was my, let me take a bow, let me take all the credit." And the truly humble inventor, creative, is often a great collaborator who recognizes a good idea when others bring it to them.
Question from the audience. Thinking of how to bring more creativity in creative industry is easier. How can you spot creativity in leadership or leadership style? Steve Jobs set the standard example of creative leader, but do you have another example of a creative leader with maybe a different style of leadership?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I lead a team. I have over 100 faculty that I'm overseeing in our college at Grand Canyon University, and I have to be open to their creativity, their innovation, and I think that's true in hospital settings. It's true in scientific settings. It's true in business. You want people to bring their whole selves into the endeavor. And so, encouraging people to have ideas, encouraging people to bring forth innovation, takes an openness, a certain kind of humbleness in the form of leadership. So it's not just saying this is where we're going, and I don't care what anybody says. This is how we're going to do it. It's saying this is where we're going. Now, how can you help us get there? How do you bring your best self into the company, understanding our goals, but then also bringing your own imagination in how to best get there.
How have collaboration, honest acknowledgement of your limitations expanded your own creative impact?
Hmm. I think when you step back, it's fun to see who steps up. It's great to make room. I'm now at an age and stage, I've earned this gray hair, and I like to be regularly surprised when younger people on my team take on leadership positions and do more than I thought they were capable of. It surprises them, and it surprises me, and it maybe surprises the client. But that's how you actually grow a company. That's how you enable them to continue to expand their possibilities and to imagine more. And so I like to be, you know, surprised by what people bring to the team.
What's the last piece of advice you would give for people to bring out the creativity in themselves, whatever that looks like in whatever profession they're in, and not limit their thinking?
I would say it's carving out unstructured space in a day. It's figuring out how to waste time at a time when everything is so transactional. We're all about efficiency. Uh, I think not treating ourselves like a computer, but treating ourselves as a fully embodied human being is what allows us to imagine a brighter future, a new product, a different solution.
Craig, it went too fast. I would like to be working with you on a daily basis just to talk about this stuff. Thank you again for taking the time. It's an excellent book. I think a really good book for young people because I think it would really help them tremendously.
Well, thank you, Mark. I appreciate the work you do, so many authors that you've brought into the marketplace, and I'm honored to be in that long train of writers and storytellers.
Well, thank you again.